Title sequence, image of the Earth rotating. Title, Sustaining Community-Based Lives, International Lessons in Fostering Inclusion. Webinar recording March 2025. Logo, Global Leadership Exchange and Australian Department of Social Services.
Hello everyone, my name is Helen Milroy. I'm a Palku woman from the Pilbara region in Western Australia, but I live on the wonderful lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people in Boorloo in Perth in Western Australia. I'm also one of the newest members of the Global Leadership Exchange Board, and I'm really happy to be on a board with such amazing skills, compassion and understanding. So first of all, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional countries on which we're all meeting from today. I actually happen to be in Sydney tonight, so I'm speaking to you from a completely different homeland. But just to pay our respects to elders past, present, and all our young people who are our emerging leaders across Australia and New Zealand, and indeed across the whole world, and to understand the experiences that our ancestors went through in order to ensure our survival and our well-being into the future and the well-being of our children. And also just to understand what an acknowledgement means of country and what a welcome to country means. And that's about creating an understanding of where we've come from and where we're going to, but also safe passage while we're journeying across other people's countries. I'd also like to acknowledge lived experience. So I think to lead informed by our personal experience comes from a place of courage that is also done from a place of strength. And our lived experience leaders help develop our collective understanding of what works and what will make a positive difference. And we acknowledge and respect all of those working from their lived and living experience in the webinar today. And if there's one thing that I really like about our current systems is that we're recognising diversity much more and we're working together much more. Still got a long way to go, don't doubt that. But I think that there's an understanding now that not one shoe fits everybody and that there are different ways of thinking. In fact, from an Indigenous perspective, there are different ways of knowing, being and doing. And so welcoming that diversity, welcoming that richness that comes from complexity and different ways of thinking, I think will only enrich us as we move forward as leaders trying to improve and transform our mental health systems of care and in fact trying to improve mental health, particularly for our children. So by trade, I'm a child psychiatrist, and I really have a passion for children. I'd love to see the mental health of all of our children collectively around the world improve, but particularly for our Indigenous kids, considering their histories in Australia and the levels of transgenerational trauma which continue to impact on our children's lives today. And also the great strength that we come from as well. I mean, I think some of the things that we do in culture are pretty cool for everybody. And I'd also like to make sure that we include some of that going forward as we think about new solutions to help our children and families heal from the past, but also create positive steps for their future. So this event is a webinar organised by GLE. So I'll just tell you a little bit about the organisation. So the Global Leadership Exchange is a global network of leaders in disability, mental health and substance use addictions. We exist to help leaders share knowledge, highlight promising practices and drive progress toward independent, thriving, self-directed lives for all. I've been to some of the GLE exchanges myself before joining the board, and I have to really encourage you to do that. They are wonderful events. So GLE brings together leaders from across the disability ecosystem, including lived experience advocates, family members, government, civil society, service providers, and academia. We believe leadership isn't about a title. Leaders are those who bring people together to work towards a shared purpose. Everyone has the potential to contribute as a leader in their own way. Through GLE, we champion collective and inclusive leadership approaches to tackle the complex challenges in our sectors. And, just I suppose a comment from me, leadership is really not about leading, is it? It's really about bringing your community with you on a journey that ensures our survival into the future and helps us create flourishing communities for our children. So this 2-hour webinar will explore how we can sustain inclusive, community-based lives for people with disabilities. The first hour, there will be 3 speakers, Paul Gibson, Kyle Aekins and Dr. Rachel Skoss, and they will share their impacts from participating in GLE's international matches. They will discuss leadership by people with disabilities, family leadership and health equity, 3 key pillars of sustaining community participation. Afterwards, attendees can join in breakout rooms for further discussion and Q&A. In the second hour, we will shift the focus to where we live. So our keynote speaker, Dr. Winkler, will highlight innovations in housing and living support. We will also hear 2 real-world experiences through the My Home, My Way project. And finally, Esther Woodbury and Andrew Whitecross will help us reflect on key takeaways. We encourage you to engage with the session, and we welcome your feedback through a survey at the end of the event. Just a little bit of housekeeping. GLE aims to create a respectful, inclusive and safe space for dialogue. Accessibility choices we have made to help everyone enjoy this event include Auslan interpreters, with thanks to the Department of Social Services. Automatic captions are enabled. Chat is turned off, but you can contact the event organisers if you need some assistance. Thank you very much, and I hope you will enjoy the webinar ahead of you. Thank you. Bye for now.
What a wonderful welcome that we received from Helen. So I believe our planned first speaker, Paul, has had a little bit of trouble joining. So I'm going to move straight into introducing Kylie Aekins as our first speaker. So Kylie is based in New South Wales, Australia. And she's a peer facilitator at Plumtree, a mum to 2 amazing neurodiverse kids and passionate about family-centred service. She will share her experiences at the Family Leadership Match as part of the Utrecht Leadership Exchange last year. Welcome, Kylie.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. So I just wanted to share who I am first quickly. I am a trained parent peer worker, so I'm a mum, as Ling said, and I work for Plumtree Children's Services in Sydney Marrickville. So Plumtree is an organisation with over 35 years experience in early childhood intervention, and it is focused on family-centred practice and employs family leaders. So it trains and employs the family. So I, when I came into this, currently had finished a 36-month Parents as Peer Leaders project, which was funded under the Information and Linkages and Capacity Building Grant from the government. And over this time, I got to connect in with families in Australia. I spoke to 1,008 families without NDIS funding and a few more hundred that did have NDIS funding. So NDIS funding is National Disability Insurance funding through the Australian government. And when I talked to these families, I got to talk to them in the most busiest and most vulnerable times of their lives. And it was amazing just that parent-to-parent connection that I had straight away with them, and just how much they wanted to engage straight away and talk to another parent who had that lived experience. And through this project, we were able to go on and train 112 of them to become family leaders. And then 45 of them have become Now and Next facilitators, which is what the program was based on, the Now and Next program, which is a strengths-based program. Also, over a third of them were from culturally and linguistically diverse families, and over a quarter of them were fathers. And one of the most amazing things that we got to see was just the way that they built on their capacity, how their agency grew over that time. And they didn't actually even realise that they needed inclusion and what inclusion meant to them. And it was wonderful to see those light bulb moments in families where they realised that they could have a good life, a valued life, a life in the community. And, you know, they got to understand that social model around their children and why it was so important for them to advocate. So this was the work that I had been doing when we heard about the Global Leadership Exchange. And I think it was really important that we wanted to get the message around families and family leadership to be a part of the exchange. And that's why we came into the Global Leadership Exchange. And Silvana Marmik, who's the CEO of Plumtree Children's Services, asked me if I would like to attend. And of course, I took up that opportunity very, very quickly. So then what happened was that I hadn't travelled for 17 years. So I left my family and I travelled all the way across to Ireland. We were hosted by the Inclusive Living Network, which is a the Centre of Disability Law and Policy Institute of Life Course and Society at the University of Galway in Ireland. And I can just say what a stunning and beautiful place to actually host a match. I felt very honoured to be there. And from the moment that I met the team of Maria Walls and all of the parents and peers and self-advocates that she had with her, I was humbled and inspired from the very moment I met them. We got to meet as a collective with representatives from all other countries, and together we had an opening and a closing ceremony which had a really deep spiritual element which connected us to the land and to the rich history of the people, which absolutely was moving from the very beginning. And then together we discussed the differing views and approaches from all of our countries. We talked about the key values of disability in the community, and we talked about how when people with disability are included, they get known to their communities, and over this time, this sense of belonging to their community is what really keeps all of us safe. We then discussed the foundations for individualised supports and how they may look in different countries, and then when it is truly personalised, that this can actually transform the lives for everyone's life for the better and create a good life and a valued life with purpose. We heard from differing leaders in governments and how they would support their personal budgets for people with disability in their countries. And, you know, gave an example with Andrew Whitecross talking about the NDIS in Australia. And then we went on to discuss supporting leadership in personhood under the frame of the UN CRPD and how it's essential for the legal rights of all in that supported decision making. And we talked about removing some of those barriers and how important the voices of people with disabilities were. We got to hear from people with disabilities such as Paul Alford and Christina Burke and Ursula Reagan talking about her son Ryan. And what we heard was a real call to action. It was a really deep call to action and really hopeful. So I left feeling inspired, and that continued through into the Netherlands. So from my experience, I have been forever changed. The stories and the experiences shared really fueled and refreshed and renewed my passion for supporting and encouraging families, creating family leadership, advocating for our children, because ultimately we want to amplify the voice of our children so they can become self-advocates. So since returning to Australia, we have continued our parent-led programs and our family-centred approach under a strengths-based approach. We have facilitated more family leaders. We're currently delivering now in next groups in Australia at Plumtree Children's Services, but all throughout Australia, both to rural and remote areas. And we have sponsored those that don't have NDIS funding. So Plumtree continues to sponsor. We have other wonderful programs that we offer, but one of the ones I'm really proud of that we're about to commence now is the Now and Next School, which is for supporting families with school-aged children to amplify their voice and develop effective learning goals, individualised learning plans, and collaborate with the educators to really share and amplify the child and student voice. And so the message that I really got from the exchange is that there's a lot we're doing well, and there's a lot more that we can be doing collectively together, and that we really want to amplify the voice and listen to the stories, because listening to the stories and the lived experiences of the families and the people with disability really creates those positive pathways and gives so much hope to all of us. So it really was an incredible experience, one that I will treasure forever.
Thank you so much, Kylie. Really appreciate you sharing your experience.
I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for listening, everyone.
So let me introduce you now to our next speaker, which is Dr. Rachel Skoss.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi and hello. Oh, do you want to tell?
Yeah, I was going to introduce you a little bit, Rachel. So Rachel is
all
an
right.
independent.
Crack on.
Rachel is an independent consultant and a senior researcher and a parent based in Western Australia. Her research focus is on health literacy and how people with intellectual disability are supported with their health. And she is sharing her reflections on the Equally Well match from Utrecht last year. So Rachel, you're all queued up.
Thank you, and I apologise for jumping the gun. And first, I'd just like to say Kaya, and I'm talking to you from the Woodbury lands in Perth, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend those respects to all First Nations people on the call. And I'd also like to extend my respects to all people with lived experience, both of mental illness and disability, and also the lived experience of carers of people on the call. And thank you so much for the opportunity to tell you about my experiences with the match and the GLE meeting. So first, just as a little bit of my background, Ash just said that I'm a researcher, and my focus is on people with how people with intellectual disability are supported with their health and well-being. So a large part of that does relate to health literacy of caregivers and all the different ways they support the person with respect to healthy living, accessing healthcare, making sure people receive preventative healthcare, as well as managing chronic and acute health or mental health issues. And that interest is in part driven by my lived experience as a primary carer of a young person with an intellectual disability who has also experienced various co-occurring issues that impact his health and his well-being. And for those who are interested, I've put a link to the health guide I wrote in the chat, which just really gives you a better overview of my perspective on how we support people in a holistic way and the various roles that caregivers have in supporting that health. So I signed up for the Equally Well match. Equally Well is an alliance who aim to improve the quality of life for people living with mental illness by providing equal access to quality health care. They use data to influence policymakers, they share effective resources, and they support those who are developing new programs and models of care. So why is this needed? Because unfortunately, people who have mental illness are more likely to have a reduced lifespan, and often that is from preventable conditions and not getting adequate care at the right time. So given the fact that I work in the intellectual disability space, you might be wondering why I wanted to go on a mental health match when clearly my work is in disability. But there are many parallels. People with intellectual disability die on average more than 25 years earlier than the general population. Again, this is often from preventable health conditions and not being able to access care that meets their needs. When you think about it, people with intellectual disability are often prescribed with the same psychotropic medications, although not for the mental health conditions. Those are the medications are prescribed off-label for behaviours, and the prevalence is quite high. So I felt I had a lot to learn from the Equally Well match, particularly with respect to their successful strategies with getting all of these issues on the agenda of government. And also for how to galvanise all the people who have a stake in this, from community members, people lived experience, health services and government. The match was in London and it didn't disappoint. I gained a lot of insight from those attending, and I'd really like to particularly highlight the contribution by people with lived experience, both of mental illness and of caring for a family member with mental illness. They explored and let us know how all of that impacted their health and what we should consider when we think about preventive health care. After a busy and thought-provoking 2 days, it was onwards to Utrecht. Sadly, my luggage stayed in London for a couple of days, but I made it safely to the Netherlands. And again, there was a lot of content to stimulate the mind, but most valuable to me were actually the discussions held on the sidelines. Disability is a very broad church, and so it was those one-on-one discussions related to intellectual disability which were really important for me going forwards. I'd like to take the opportunity to put the notion of holistic healthcare for people with intellectual disability on the agenda for the Canada meeting. For this group, it's really helpful to consider both physical and mental health together with aspects of what makes a quality life, including the community participation and self-determination that our previous speaker was just talking about. While the disability, health and mental health services are often siloed, we have a lot of opportunities to think about how people with intellectual disability are adequately supported with both their physical and mental health, while still getting their social care needs met and aiming for a quality of life. Some of the ideas formulated during the match and the GLE meeting were really critical for my path forwards, and I'm super pleased to say that thanks to funding from the Department of Social Services and NDIA, I'm now working on a peer support and capacity building project with Microboards Australia. Our project has a focus on facilitation of planning for health and wellbeing for people with intellectual disability who also experience complex needs. This is where I'm bringing all those learnings together so that caregivers can support people with complex needs to have better health and wellbeing outcomes. So I'd like to say watch this space. Thank you again for the opportunity to talk to you about it.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Really appreciate your time and your reflections. And delighted now to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Di Winkler. Di established the Summer Foundation in January 2006. The Summer Foundation is changing systems to ensure people with disability and complex support needs have access to high quality housing options that enhance health, wellbeing and participation. The recent report, Innovation in Housing and Living for People with Disability, completed an international environmental scan, which has great lessons to share with everyone. I'm very excited to invite Di.
Thanks, Ashlyn. So I'm just going to start by just sharing my screen. And because I've got a few slides to share, so I'll just take a minute to do that. So now I'm hoping that you can see the slide, is that right?
Yes, we can see the slide. Looks great. Thanks, Di.
So thank you. Thanks for your time today, and really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about innovation in housing and living. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we live. So I'm on the land of the Wurundjeri people, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm just going to start by sharing a 3-minute video just that provides some context about why the Summer Foundation is now working on innovation in housing and support, because we did start off specifically focusing on the issue of young people in aged care.
We're excited to announce that a new dawn is coming for the Summer Foundation. Since we were established in 2006, we've had a significant impact on solving the issue of younger people in residential aged care. We created the 10+1 housing model for people with disability with high support needs. This has led to the creation of more than 2,000 enrolled specialist disability accommodation apartments all over the country. We've successfully lobbied the government to change the building code as part of the Building Better Homes campaign, resulting in an anticipated 103,000 accessible homes to be built by 2027. Our advocacy helped lock in the government to measurable, time-bound targets to solve the issue of younger people in residential aged care by 2025. Most importantly, in collaboration with other organisations, we've helped more than 7,500 younger people avoid residential aged care. And we established the Housing Hub, which has provided expert support to more than 1,200 people with disability to find a home. But the promise of the NDIS has not been realised for many of the people who need access to 24/7 supports. That needs to change. And the Summer Foundation needs to change to help deliver on it. We're relaunching with a bold new vision, focus not just on younger people in residential aged care, but the more than 40,000 Australians with disability who need access to 24/7 supports. The only option for many of these people is to live in group homes, where the support is often poor quality, expensive, and puts people at increased risk of violence, abuse, and neglect. Our research and experience shows that better outcomes are possible and affordable for government. People with complex support needs have the right to equitable and inclusive housing, support, and services. But we can't do it alone. We're looking for like-minded collaborators to help us bring about a new dawn in housing and living for Australians with disability. Better is possible. Help us make it happen. We're excited to announce that a new dawn is coming for the Summer Foundation. Since we were established...
Sorry about that. So the question I'm going to tackle today is what housing and living models enable people with disability to live independently within supportive, integrated communities. I'm going to start by sharing some findings from research that measures outcomes of people moving into new housing options. Then we're going to look at what we're learning from work that we're doing to explore innovation in housing and living. And then just going to finish touching on just the ongoing challenges of belonging and community inclusion. So as outlined in the video, the Summer Foundation pioneered the 10+1 model in Australia. This model generally has 10 accessible apartments scattered throughout a larger residential development. And then an extra apartment provides a base for disability support workers. So people get to live in the community like everybody else and have neighbours like everybody else, but they also have access to 24/7 on-site support. So in an initial study, we measured the outcomes of people moving from a range of environments, including group homes and living with parents, into apartments. And the pilot study found significant improvements in health, wellbeing and community integration, trends towards improved health. Daily support hours were reduced by 2.4 hours, and less tenants required overnight support. So we're also getting some really terrific insights from the in-depth interviews about what's working and not working for people living in apartments. But I guess what we're also finding is there's real variation in how the 10+1 model is operating across Australia. So we have some disability housing providers that have set up the model so that the tenants can choose their own provider for personal care and community integration. And on some sites, tenants have a say in the appointment and management of the shared support provider. But we're finding that other providers are just delivering the support in a similar way that they would be in a group home with a similar culture. So I guess one of the learnings for us over the years has been that it's relatively straightforward and easy to build a great environment, but the biggest challenge, and I think this is where there's the opportunity to make the biggest difference, is redesigning how support is delivered within someone's home. So we're expanding this study, and we're starting to look at the outcomes of people moving into a range of settings, including different types of disability housing, so share houses, townhouses and villas, but also looking at the outcomes of people moving into individualised living arrangements, or ILOs as they're called with NDIS funding. So we need to recruit 150 people moving into a range of new housing options in the next 12 months. And this longitudinal study will run for another 2.5 years. We're really passionate about outcome data because we think that it's absolutely crucial for informing service design and also improving outcomes for people with disability. So as Ashlyn said, our starting point for exploring innovation in housing and living was an initial environmental scan that was published last year. So I guess we were really interested in looking at how the built environment, the technology and support might work better together to enable people with disability to live with dignity in the community. And I guess the findings from this initial scan, they were really useful, not mind-blowing. We didn't identify anything that was very different from what we already knew about. But the scan was really helpful for just pointing to areas that needed further exploration. So at the Summer Foundation, we're currently exploring 4 areas where we think there's scope for innovation and improving outcomes. We're also doing some economic analysis because we want to better understand the cost drivers in the current model of providing support in disability housing. And we're also testing potential solutions and getting insights from people with disability. So I'm now going to talk about each of these 4 areas. Self-determined lives, the governance of shared support, flexible and responsive support, and then finally shared lives. So the NDIS review found that particularly for people with cognitive disability, there was limited opportunity to be involved in making decisions, including big decisions like where to live, but also smaller decisions like how to spend time during the day. And at the moment, we see 2 main opportunities. So there's a big opportunity just to help people with disability to know their rights related to their home and support, and know what to do and how to make complaints or how to provide feedback. And then the other opportunity is tools and resources that enable people with disability to be more in charge in how their support is delivered. So what have we done to date regarding self-determined lives? We've co-designed a series of resources that was funded by the Quality and Safeguards Commission. And these resources are now available on the Housing Hub website. So these are resources to support people to know their rights and make complaints and provide feedback. And then the other thing we did is a few years ago, we co-designed a process called participant-led videos. And this was about enabling people with disability to develop training videos for support workers. And this intervention was specifically designed for people with cognitive and communication difficulties. So now we're looking at how we might develop an app or a platform that makes it easier to produce these videos. The other thing that we've done is market scan, because I guess when we were thinking about developing an app for participant-led videos, we wanted to make sure that we weren't already duplicating something that was out there. And so from this scan, we found that we are not duplicating an existing product, but we've also identified some other resources with potential for impact. So what are we doing next? We're going to disseminate the resources about rights and look at getting them into the hands of the people who need them. We'll be publishing the market scan related to participant-led videos, and we're also starting to do some user testing on some other promising digital resources. So with the governance of shared support, the problem we're trying to solve is that within disability housing, people with disability often have very little say over who provides their support and how that support is delivered. And in a lot of disability housing, the rhythm of the household often revolves around the needs of staff instead of the needs and preferences of people with disability. So the opportunities we see are looking at how we might redesign how shared support is delivered in housing, and having people with disability actively involved in the governance of shared support. And we think this has a lot of potential to transform services. So what have we done? with the 10+1 model, our researchers found that choice and control around support really varies across sites. And so we have done a series of co-design workshops to explore the challenges and potential solutions with the tenants, with housing providers, and with support providers. We've also recently completed an evaluation of shared support facilitation, a pilot that was implemented by Enliven. And then with governance models, we've also done some initial research and co-design work, looking at the possibility of co-ops of NDIS participants and how they might commission support services. So what next? We're publishing the evaluation of the Enliven model. And we're also recently awarded a grant from the Quality and Safeguards Commission to develop a disability housing and living index. And this index will measure housing and living arrangements against the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, and especially Article 19. And we see this as an opportunity to really define what good contemporary disability housing and support looks like and set some new expectations in this sector. And we're also part of this, the role of this index will be to enable providers to benchmark their services. So the problem we're trying to solve with related to flexible and responsive support is that people with disability are telling us that they used to be able to do some things independently, and that for some people, providers are now insisting that they have a support worker with them. We also know that other people with disability and some of the people that I've worked with over the years, they find having support workers in their home for hours at a time challenging or inconvenient, but they would really benefit from having access to 24/7 telesupport so they can get assistance with problem solving when they need it, when they get in a pickle, but they don't have somebody kind of with them when they don't need it. So some people, they don't want just the option of having workers scheduled to be in their house. They need more flexible options. The other thing we know is that with the opportunities that there are a few providers delivering flexible support models, but these services have struggled rather than flourished with introduction of the NDIS and individualised funding. So we think that there's an opportunity to think there's scope for providing a broader range of services to people with disability, not just scheduled shifts of disability support workers. So what have we done so far? We've identified and met with and interviewed current providers because we want to understand what they're delivering and what's working. We've also commissioned an environmental scan from the University of Sydney to look at technology with the potential to increase the quality and efficiency of disability support. And then we've also started testing concepts for new service offerings with people with disability. So what next? We need to spend more time with the current support providers to really understand their current business models and their challenges. And we're also really interested to interview current users of these services because we want to understand what's working and not working for them and really understand what the value proposition is for them compared to a scheduled disability support worker. The other thing that really came up within the environmental scan is just some of the privacy issues with monitoring technology. So I guess what we're thinking a lot about is how do you make technology available to people with disability, but also make sure there are frameworks that ensure that technology, particularly monitoring technology, is not imposed on people with disability and just impinge on people's privacy particularly. And finally, we're also exploring shared lives. And so I guess with this topic, the problem is that we really anticipated that individualised living arrangements or individualised living options would flourish in Australia with the introduction of individualised funding available from the NDIS. And but instead, the number of people with disability that have access to ILAs has decreased rather than increased since the introduction of the scheme. And ILAs are mostly only available in Western Australia. So we think the opportunity is to look at how a range of ILAs might be made available to more people with disability across Australia. So what have we done? We've completed a market scan of ILA providers. We've done a study tour to meet ILA providers and people with disability using the services. And we are working with an economist to understand the cost of ILAs relative to group homes. We're also working with some researchers at the University of British Columbia to learn how ILAs have been scaled in Canada. We're also planning some research to look at the outcomes and costs of ILAs in Australia. So what next? We're going to publish the research that we've commissioned, and we're also working on a shared lives policy solutions report. So in conclusion, we think there are some promising solutions, but there's just no one model that's going to work for everyone, which is kind of quite obvious. And I guess what we really want to see is a range of options and real choice. And as I mentioned before, the physical build is the easier piece. The challenge is really how you make sure that the support is individualised, tailored, and delivered with dignity and respect. And I guess the other thing is with community inclusion and belonging, it doesn't happen automatically. So some people are getting good outcomes in terms of community inclusion and participation, but not everyone is. And I think one of the challenges with that is that some organisations use social isolation as a reason to justify more segregated living arrangements, saying things that people will be lonely in their own apartment or unit. And I think the underlying assumption is that people's only possible friends are other people with disability. And don't get me wrong, I think that we want to see a range of options and we want to see people living with other people, not always kind of single occupancy options. But I think we're just not doing enough to enable people to be included in the community and belong. And I think part of this is that most disability support workers, I don't think, really understand their role and often get in the way rather than support community inclusion. And so the best disability support workers do themselves out of a job. And so in terms of housing and support, more inclusive housing and support is just the first step to community inclusion. Most people need a skilled person to support them to explore interests and hobbies and identify places in their local community where they might belong. And yeah, we really believe in Australia that we're just not doing enough to kind of go beyond just housing and support and enabling people to be included and belong in their local community. Thank you for listening.
It was a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much, Di. I can see lots of interest in the research and the insights that you shared. So thank you very much. We really appreciate your time. I'm going to keep us moving through our planned events because one of the things that we were keen to include within this webinar is also the voices of people with disability sharing their own words what living in and being part of the community can look like for them. So we worked with our colleagues at the National Alliance of Capacity Building Organisations, NACBO, to share 2 videos from the My Home, My Way project. And this is a project that helps people with disabilities and those who love and care for them to explore individualized and innovative ways to create their own home whilst getting the support that they need. So let me cue up our first video.
So Jess, do you like living here?
Yeah,
Yeah? What's so good about living here?
it has mate.
I knew Jess's family through church when I first moved back to Stirling. Julianne just called me up one day, and it was at the end of a week where I was just a bit sick of living where I was, and it was like she just knew that I needed a different place to live, and I think I'd moved in within 2 weeks, and yeah, it's been 3.5 years, so it's good.
What's your favourite thing about having housemates, Jess?
The basketball
We go to the basketball, don't we?
and the 36ers.
36ers.
So the arrangement for living here, this is a unique situation, and you do have 2 housemates that work alongside each other with Jess. We just really support her in the things that she likes to do.
What some fun things do we do?
And football. Go to the beach.
Sometimes we have fish and chips at the beach.
Last Thursday, we're gonna warm water. Gonna go to the beach.
I would really encourage other families to consider something similar for their family if they can. You know, it's a really great way to have a support system. She is independent, chooses her own things for the week, and has the freedom to go for a walk and get a coffee. And you know, Jess loves to entertain and have friends over, and she can because this is her house.
All right, let's get a frying pan out, Jess.
Between myself and the other housemates, we get her up either before we have to get going or an hour before she gets going, and breakfast and all that before she goes. Usually we split the cost of any kind of groceries that we share.
When do we normally have dinner together as housemates?
Oh,
Mondays,
Monday, Wednesday,
and
Thursdays.
that's when we have housemates dinner, don't we?
Everywhere.
And
Every night.
sometimes it's me, and sometimes it's Emma, and sometimes it's someone else.
Someone else.
I would love a pancake.
Do you want to set the table for 3 housemates?
All right.
I definitely feel at home here. Sometimes housemate live-in situations, you know, you'll just be passing each other, you don't really interact as much. And here, it's like you've always got a buddy.
Do you have some questions for me?
What you like about living here?
What do I like about living here? I will answer that question. What do I like about living here? I like living with you
Me.
in Stirling,
Here.
close to all our friends,
Other friends.
and we can have them over.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
And I like hanging out with you.
Me.
Yeah. I like going grocery shopping with you.
Yep.
And planning meals with you. I really like that. That's fun.
Yeah.
What's the favourite things that we cook together?
Lemon chicken Monday
Lemon
night.
chicken. Yeah, we're gonna have that on Monday night. What's another dish that we really love?
Seafood pasta.
Seafood pasta.
On
Yeah.
Wednesday night.
You want that on Wednesday night?
Next Wednesday. Next Wednesday night. Next Wednesday.
Hey Jess. Jess, is it okay if I use your milk? Cool. Can I steal it? Cool, you live for it enough. Go for it. Thank you.
I think it's really important that everyone gets along and everyone enjoys each other's company in a house like this. To be able to want to hang out on the sofa and watch a movie midweek, or have dinner together, or go for a drive together.
Amelia make red velvet cake? Yeah, tonight. Did you help her? Or did you just watch?
Yeah, I really enjoy doing life with Jess.
Yeah. Do you put it in his coffee?
I think we're pretty close friends, and yeah, I quite appreciate it.
What's your favourite TV show that you love to watch?
Friends.
Do you have every season?
I haven't seen
Who's your favourite character?
Dory. He's so naughty.
He is so naughty.
There's a rat bag.
Rat bag.
There's a rat bag.
Yeah.
What does the rat bag?
Your dog is a rat bag.
This video starts with footage of Hayley, a woman in her mid-30s who has auburn shoulder-length hair and wears glasses. Hayley is locking the front door of her unit, which is nestled in a leafy townhouse community. Throughout the video there is footage of Hayley opening curtains, sweeping the courtyard, doing her laundry, wiping down her dining table, watering her indoor plants, walking on her treadmill, preparing meals and catching a bus to work. This footage appears throughout the story shared by Hayley and her mother, Marilyn Richards. Text: It's my turn now. Hayley's story about moving into her own home where she's thriving and living a meaningful life. Text: Marilyn Richards, Hayley's mum.
Hayley's got 2 sisters and a brother. They all left and it was her turn.
I watched my brother and my sisters moved out.
Text: Hayley Richards.
And I told my mum, it's my turn now, please.
Hayley's been on the housing list since she was 18. She's now 38 and still nothing from the housing department. Because Hayley wanted to come in on her own, Graham and I decided that we'd purchase Hayley a unit. She pays rent, that pays for the loan. This is Hayley's home. It will always be Hayley's home. We were looking at a unit because the house would be too big for her, and she didn't want anyone in with us. She wanted to be on herself, fully independent. That's a bit scary when you think, my God, she's going from home to a place on her own. I think at my age especially, I've got to let go because I'm not going to be here for, well, you know, ages. I've got to make sure that Hayley's settled. You ask any parent with a child with a disability and they'll say, just want them settled before we depart. That's their main worry. Took us 2 to 3 years to find this place. We'd looked at numerous places before. Saw this one on the market, just took one look and this is it. The feel of it was really good, very safe place.
When I first moved in, I was about 30 of age. I bought the kitchen table for myself and the fridge. Mum and Dad helped. My second room, I turned that into a gym.
The first night I was just beside myself. Off you go, Mum, I'll be fine. Locked the door behind me and that was it. I went home and cried, I think, or worried all night.
Marilyn and Hayley FaceTime.
But the next morning, she phoned me. Hi, Mum. I said, hello. I'm going to work now. See you later. I'll hear from you later. And that was it. We'd spoken to her right from the word go. She wasn't allowed to let anybody in, answer the doors. She knows the routine, unlocks and comes in and closes blinds. Everything that she did at home continues here. It's just become part and parcel of Hayley's life and routine.
I do lots of jobs around the house.
Hayley is ticking off her chores written on a whiteboard.
I usually use the jobs board to make sure the jobs are done. I like sweeping the patio, washing, very good with cooking, everything nice and clean and tidy. I usually make sure I've got plenty of food for friends to come over.
The lady comes in and her and Hayley sit down and decide what they're going to cook. They look at menus, then they go from here to the shops, buy the ingredients and come back and cook up a storm.
A montage of urban facilities.
My house is closer to the shops, the gym.
Hayley catches a bus.
Bus stops, get to work on time, really happy.
Hayley waves to an elderly man.
I met James upstairs when I first moved in. He keeps watch. I feel really safe when James is around.
The neighbour James has helped her out a lot. The other people next door, they've stepped in a couple of times too to help. She lost the keys once. Since then we have a key hide now and Hayley knows how to do that. Well, she knows that she can go to the neighbours at any time. They have been in and spoken to us and said, anytime, Hayley, you need help, please call. She has made a few mistakes along the way, but she's corrected it herself and learnt from those. We all learn from mistakes.
Hayley crosses the road.
The other day, she rang me, "Mum, the bus is gone. I'll get on this bus." So she did that herself. She worked that out. She just amazes me sometimes with how intelligent she is.
She boards a bus.
And what she can achieve. I mean, look, she's had accidents. She's lost keys and she's lost cards. And I don't know. You go through all that, but in the end, it all comes up in the wash, That's life. When Hayley gets home, "Hi Mum, I'm home." We do the FaceTime and we watch the TV and say goodnight. The phone is a very important tool. We have Find Friends. It's an app on the phone, which is a great app. She follows me and I follow where she is. I still worry a great deal about her. I've been told a lot that I've got to let go more. I know that.
She messes up worry about me, to be honest.
She blows me away sometimes.
Hayley heads to work. In Kmart, she puts on her name tag and chats to a colleague in the clothes section.
I'm very proud of her. Now I might tear up. I'm very proud. Yeah, she's succeeded. But I know that she's got a safety net there and she'll be fine. I know of young people that are in group homes.
In an armchair, Hayley uses the TV remote.
But I would thoroughly recommend people, let them go, let them try to live on their own. You can be there to catch them if they fall, but they've got to be given a chance.
She makes a cup of tea.
It feels really fantastic, really happy to be here. The best thing is being here on my own with no one around me. I love my whole house.
Text, with thanks to Hayley Richards and Marilyn Richards for sharing their story so beautifully. With thanks to Josh Mulrine of Digital Content Studios for his video storytelling expertise. digitalcontentstudios.com. This video was filmed on the lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. Produced by Imagine More for My Home, My Way. myhomemyway.com.au. This
Wow, it was fantastic to have Di's in-depth exploration of good practices and innovation, the combination of technology, good policy, accessibility, and innovative support options. And then to see that come to life in both Jess's home share arrangement and Hayley's independent unit, it's a really great way to kind of crystallize what is possible and what good living can look like. And we know sometimes you can walk away from a webinar and feel, oh my goodness, I had so many great ideas and things thrown at me. What am I going to do now? So we have asked two people to help us. We've asked Esther Woodbury, who's the Principal Advisor Disability at the New Zealand Health and Disability Commissioner's Office, and Andrew Whitecross, who's the Group Manager responsible for disability and carer programs at the Australian Department of Social Services, to help us by reflecting on the key messages they're leaving the webinar with today. Esther, can I invite you to, are there any initial impressions that you're thinking about after the time together today?
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko waio, ko Pākehā hou, ko te whanganui atara, te kāinga, ko tangata whaikaha ahau, ko Esther Woodbury, taku ingoa, tēnā koutou katoa. Just introducing myself, I am Esther Woodbury. I am a disabled person who lives in Te Whanganui Atara, Wellington, the capital of New Zealand. I'm Pākehā, and as Ashling said, I'm currently working for the Health and Disability Commissioner's Office, which is work around people's rights when they access health and disability services in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone so much for all the speakers and for the breakout sessions. Some really fantastic work happening in lots of different spaces. I'm really sorry we couldn't hear from Paul Gibson. That's a real shame because he's doing some amazing work at VisAble, which is a disability-specific agency that responds to and prevents abuse, neglect, and harm that disabled people experience in New Zealand. I just wanted to also kind of acknowledge that it's a very difficult time for tangata whaikaha and disability communities in Aotearoa. There's been a lot of government policy changes related to the funding of disability supports, and there's a lot of we've also had disability support funding move from a disability specific ministry, and so there's a lot of change happening in the moment, and I think there's a lot of there's probably a lot of fear about what's coming next and for disability and for whānau families. So it's really great to hear about this really awesome work that's happening in Australia, and I was really inspired by all of our speakers, but you know, thank you to Kylie, really super important stuff about making sure that, you know, any government policies, all governments take a nothing about us without us approach with disability communities, ensuring that families and disabled people are really involved in making decisions not just at the micro level but also at the macro level. And I wanted to thank, I took part in Rachel's breakout room, and there's a lot of really amazing stuff happening around building health literacy and knowledge among disabled people and families, and some really great stuff that we heard about, and I'm really looking forward to all of the, I'm aware of some of the resources already, but really looking forward to learning more about some more of those resources, and looking forward to getting those links. And thanks so much to Di for her talk about housing. It's of course a really big issue in Aotearoa, and it was really exciting. I think there's a lot to learn about how to work with government to achieve really targeted progress around sort of accessible and inclusive options for disabled people in the community. I'm really interested to hear more and kind of what could be learnt from whether Summer Foundation kind of worked with Indigenous communities, and kind of like what further housing solutions and could be learnt from that work. So, you know, really interested to learn more and think about kind of like how that could be applied in an Aotearoa context. I thought it was really interesting what you're saying about independent living arrangements sort of decreasing under NDIS, and obviously don't understand all the kind of technical kind of categorizations of different funding streams and living arrangements, but that was really interesting. And I've recently been reflecting on, you know, some of the things that were brought up in the videos actually, where, you know, families, we've got a kind of a generational shift where the baby boom generation are getting older, and there's a lot of thought about kind of what supports need to be in place during this kind of really transitional generation shift for the children in particular of baby boomers. So much to learn. I just want to thank everyone so much. Really amazing things happening, and amazing kind of things that we can learn from each other. And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Esther. Andrew, can I invite you in to build on those great highlights that Esther has shared from our time together today, and how people can start to take some of these lessons and key insights forward?
Sure. Thanks, Ashley. Can I start by acknowledging that I'm coming to you today from the lands of the Ngunnawal people and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I've really enjoyed the different contributions today, and I'd like to particularly acknowledge, the leadership that Summer Foundation have played in relation to innovation in approaches to self-determined living, and also the work that Kylie and others at Plumtree have done in relation to family capacity building. And I had the pleasure of travelling with Kylie to Galway for that match, and participated in those things. I think one of the themes that came out of my experience, listening to the lived experience of particularly of people with intellectual disability and also of families at that match in Galway, was the importance of creating opportunities for people to practice making decisions for themselves and to learn by doing. And that one of the biggest risks that we can impose on people with disability and on their families who are trying to support them is denying them the opportunity to make choices for themselves and to exercise their own preferences, because that lack of practice in doing it means that when difficult situations arise, they haven't built up those skills to do it, and that creates a lot of risk for people. And we also see that in institutional housing arrangements, which where there's too much too many of the day-to-day living decisions get taken over by support workers or are influenced by the presence of support workers, and can create situations where people aren't necessarily leading the lives they want to lead. So, I think that theme came through, and it comes through in the sort of models that Di was describing and trying to exemplify as well. And I think that it's a really important thing for us to think about in the different ways that practice occurs. And I really love that those examples at the end that the NACBO team put together, which also exemplified, how creating those, structured opportunities for people to start to lead independent lives and to still have the support and the connections they need to be confident in making choices. But the satisfaction that can come from being given those opportunities and the quality of life that arises from that. Obviously, Department of Social Services I work for plays a role in supporting that kind of capacity building activity through ILC, and hopefully in the future through general foundational supports when they're introduced around individual and family capacity building. And we're working to work through models to support organisations in the community to deliver those kind of supports to prepare individuals and family members and support them through learning and practicing making decisions. But I think some of the discussions today also illustrated that this is something where there are opportunities all the time in our day-to-day practice to create moments where people can learn build confidence, acquire the knowledge they need so that they can be starting to make decisions for themselves. And it doesn't have to be about support workers and structured programs. It's also just about how we go about our day-to-day business. And so I think it's that partnership between, yes, funded programs, community organisations who understand and can promote these things, and then all of us in our day-to-day practice creating those opportunities that gives the best chance for people to live both safe and fulfilled lives through leading self-determined lives.
Esther and Andrew, thank you both very much for those thoughtful reflections. It's no easy task to try and summarize nearly 2 hours worth of great ideas and content. And as all of you heard from our two speakers, Kylie and Rachel Skoss, reflecting on their time in Utrecht, one of the biggest benefits we know people get from participating in GLE is actually those side conversations and those opportunities to connect with other leaders. So to finish off our time together, we've got some randomly assigned breakout rooms, and we invite you to think of what's your one takeaway that you want to leave this meeting with today. So I'll open those and I'll keep an eye if there's any problems. And when we come back, we just have our final thank you. So I hope you meet somebody new and interesting. And as always, if you need any help, I'm here. So a big thank you to our partners at the Department for Social Services for their support in developing this webinar, and for our Global Leadership Exchange Australian Disability Reference Group members, many of whom have joined us today. Thank you so much for your wisdom and guidance. A big thank you to our Auslan interpreters, Nick, Dayla and Grace, for helping us to improve our accessibility. I want to also just acknowledge Professor Helen Milroy, who opened our time together with such a beautiful welcome to keep us safe across our journey together through this webinar, sharing stories and knowledge and experiences, and highlighting the richness that we get when we have different ways of thinking coming together. Thank you to Kylie for really talking about how your passion has been renewed for amplifying the voices of parents in order to amplify the ability for children to become self-advocates and live great lives. And to Rachel Skoss for talking about the need for that kind of holistic approach to healthcare, thinking about the physical and mental together along with those aspects of what makes a really positive community life. To Di and the team at the Summer Foundation for that excellent research. Thank you so much for sharing these promising solutions and models that enable people with disabilities to live independent and integrated lives, and continuing to build that strong evidence and database to keep informing next steps. And Esther and Andrew for sharing their insights, and even when context can be difficult, seeing the great work that comes through, as well as really that takeaway message of supporting people to make choices for themselves. Fantastic messages and a fantastic webinar. And thank you to all of you for attending, because it doesn't work without an audience. So thank you for taking time out of your busy days. At GLE, we bring together people to share great innovation or to tackle shared challenges. And if this is of interest to you, we invite you to join via our website. We have our next exchange will be held in Canada in 2026. And we have a newsletter and regular webinars keeping us together in the meantime. So just want to acknowledge everyone who participated in this meeting. Thank you for your time and your contributions. And as you leave this meeting, we hope that your day is guided by the compassion, the wisdom, the strength, and the community shared in this webinar today. Thank you and goodbye.